Technology, perhaps the most ubiquitous skill across financial services. These days, every team and line of business requires some kind of tech support as businesses continue to invest billions and oftentimes rely on programs and applications developed and created by the brilliant, talented technologists at each respective firm. Today's conversation addresses just that. Where do tech employees and candidates stand on their salary and bonus expectations being met this year? What is motivating them to consider moves? And how much has the pendulum swung from the past few years when so many tech candidates, regardless of their role, could be fully remote? Every year at Selby Jennings, we survey thousands of financial sciences and services professionals across the USA to benchmark salaries, the benefits they receive, and which factors would cause them to leave their company or entice them to join a new firm. Over the course of the next 4 weeks, we will be releasing 8 mini episodes where we unpack the findings of this report with leading market experts from Selby Jennings. My guest today is Isabel Ceniza, resident tech expert, director-level consultant in our Chicago office, who has truly mastered the tech industry from a recruitment perspective. If you're interested in reading the full report, it is linked in the show notes of this episode and available at selbyjennings.com. Hi, Iz. Good to see you.
Hi, nice to see you, Jesse.
Okay, so Isabel Ceniza, resident tech expert, panel moderator, conference extraordinaire, probably nobody better at all of Selby Jennings, at least in the US for sure, to talk about our technology findings on the bonus and salary report. Been here coming up on 6.5 years. So I want to get straight into it, specifically starting with salaries. Across the board, it looks like, according to our report, the general increase was anywhere from 5 to 15% or so. Would you say, based on the conversations that you're having with your candidates, based on the offers that are being generated, that seems to be consistent across the board in the various sectors in technology, across various skill sets? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that based off the survey findings, they were pretty much in line. I mean, base salaries typically, I see go between 5 to 15%, depending on the sector within technology and especially within financial services. One thing that I do want to note is that within the survey findings, years of experience wasn't specified. So I think that, especially within technology, junior to mid-level to senior is very clear on where the base salary should lie. Got
it. And were most candidates, did they seem to be happy with the salary, specifically salary increases that they received this year? And I think you'll find that a lot of the time I like to ask 2-part questions. So let that be the first part of the question, were the candidates happy? Second part being, do we think the 5 to 15% increase generally was of candidates who might have stayed and gotten a merit increase that significant internally? Or do you think that's more because candidates were moving and generally 15% base increases were for those who made lateral changes externally this year?
That's a good question. And I also love a 2-parter. So I think that...
Get used to it.
Yeah. Based off the survey findings, I would agree that bonuses were mostly met or exceeded. I think that majority of candidates would most likely, like if they were moving laterally, I don't think that they would have seen as drastic of a 15% base salary increase. That could have definitely been covered in the total compensation package, depending obviously on that sector. But I would for sure say, to your first point, majority of the candidates were, got what they expected or definitely are happier.
And you would say that that's aligned on both the salary and the bonus side, that their expectations were met for the year?
I think so. And especially because, majority of the candidate cycles that we work within, typically the candidates that we talk to and get a lot of our anecdotal findings are between December through end of April. So we're still kind of in that, season right now of trying to understand how people feel about it. But mid-April, I can say that people are pretty happy.
Nice. Very good. So 75% of our respondents in technology said that, bonuses and salary increases kind of met their expectations, which is good because, as you say, of that 75%, it seems that they were generally happy. So that's nice to see.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, one of the things that we typically do is try to just understand how people feel about the market. And even if they're not actively looking, try and understand what would make them interested on a passive standpoint. And realistically, candidate motivations are typically better culture, better compensation. So
got it. Well, I want to get into, maybe a little bit the culture and return to work or flexible working in a little bit. But you kind of bring up a good point there. So tell me a little bit about the, I guess, retention tactics or other motivations, either for staying or for, considering a new role. If candidates are happy with the merit increases that they've received or their bonuses, what else might be encouraging them to make a move right now?
Yeah. So I think that one, for why they want to make a move right now, there's a ton of volatility in the market. A lot of places are looking. I mean, we've noticed that just the quantity of jobs that are in the market has definitely increased in comparison to 24 and 23. So that's been amazing to see. It's been keeping us really busy. I think that given that there's more of a more influx of candidates coming into the market, I mean, obviously AI, big tech, those movements play into what financial services also has as well. I've noticed a trend of companies having to think through, like, what are different retention tactics that they want to keep to keep talent, in-house. And so that could be deferred bonus schedules, implementing those, or just like different retention bonuses. I've seen those happen as well.
Got it. Say more about the retention bonuses. I know that this is something you and I have actually personally previously spoken about. Are you seeing them, kind of across the board? Are they more of a retention tactic? Obviously buy side specific, right? Like having such prolonged non-competes or garden leaves is intended to be a bonus tactic, or having to pay them back. Are there anything else, or could you elaborate on, kind of retention tactics with regards to bonuses that you've personally been seeing?
Yeah. So two examples. One could be implementing a deferred bonus schedule. So outside of, getting your if you're already leave and you're now on your non-compete, if you're still there, maybe instead of getting your bonus in a lump sum, that is actually distributed across different schedule across the year or even into the following year. So that's one. The other one would be, I've noticed that some companies have just decided, hey, like, you'll get a bonus more so random down the year. I noticed one company in particular gave one in April.
And that was an off-schedule bonus, an additional bonus.
Correct.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Do you think that's happening everywhere, or do you think that's just like the best performing clients that are able to do that and then use it as a retention tactic?
I don't think it's happening everywhere. I think that every company has their own set of problems that they have to deal with, whether or not they're, performing super well or not performing super well, or maybe they've had, some leavers. It's our jobs to kind of figure out the movement and the trends of that, and to kind of pick that apart. But I've kind of seen it from both angles.
Got it. So, we mentioned flexible working and return to office previously. Kind of want to pivot to that a little bit and just get your take on generally what the sentiment is from candidates. Obviously from COVID and the first few years after that, tech candidates were some of the ones that were most easiest to be set remote, right? And could be hired from any location and support their teams from any location. Obviously now with a lot of return to office, especially on Wall Street, that's kind of thrown a wrench into things. What is the candidate sentiment? From our findings, it seems that for the most part, tech candidates still prioritize or are interested in having flexible working, but what are the clients offering?
Yeah. It would make my life so much easier
Yes.
if our clients were flexible with remote. But I think this is a little bit more sector dependent, I would say. Like there are some fintech and crypto firms that still operate primarily remotely, which definitely was a trend prior to COVID. But, majority of firms are really back to 4 or 5 days in office. And a lot of that, is because of the necessity of in-office collaboration, the fast-paced, nature of these types of firms. So relocation, making sure that people know the expectation of being fully back in office is pretty much across the board.
How are candidates dealing with that? How are they leaning into it? Are most people okay with it? I think from my conversations, it seems that a lot of candidates like that are joining these companies haven't necessarily been as averse to applying, right? They kind of know what they're getting themselves into, versus maybe if you're speaking with candidates who are at companies where they disagree with the policy, there's a little bit more dissension. What kind of angle are you seeing? Is it either of those, or kind of not really relevant there?
If we had this conversation maybe like a year or two ago, it would have been a little bit different. But now in 2025, it's just the expectation. And it comes at a time where, Amazon had their huge RTO, and, big tech is also following suit. So it's like, I think that it's just becoming a little bit more of the norm.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. Been consistent with how we've had these conversations with the rest of your Selby Jennings peers as well. So that makes perfect sense. You mentioned volatility a little while ago. Obviously, we are here having this conversation in mid-April, in the height of what has been a pretty crazy season with regards to the stock market. Has the volatility created anything dynamic with regards to hiring that you're seeing? Obviously, a lot of these tech candidates, especially, front office tech candidates, are supporting trade teams, right? So I'm wondering, we've personally, again, at the time of this conversation, we've personally had, we've seen some interviews get canceled or postponed or things like that. Has the volatility impacted the talent market through a sourcing perspective, through an interviewing perspective, in any way or other ways?
Yeah, I think that, to especially note, the volatility has been crazy over the past 2 weeks. I think, to your point, we've for sure seen recruiting be delayed because, interviewers need to work and need to focus on and to optimize and take advantage of that opportunity. And I think
do the day job.
Yeah, and 100%. And similarly, candidates are for sure in that same boat. I think that there's definitely been more interest of having conversations about how people are performing, what's going on in the market, less about having, candidates who are super active, but those who are outside of finance probably have more interest in coming into it at this point. But I think talking about the dynamic, especially during volatility, the things that I really think about are, how is a company going to, keep on track with their recruiting goals during these times? How are they going to be able to, work with their hiring managers to just keep that in front? And another thing that I'm trying to work on with a lot of my clients are, if everyone, let's say generally, everyone is focused on trying to take advantage of, the volatility and this opportunity. If everyone is doing well, how are they incentivizing candidates to join their firm? And I think that promoting culture, flexibility, the opportunity, compensation, whatever it is, those are the things that I really want to work on closer with clients, especially in seasons like this, because it can't just be, we're great. I think that companies and hiring managers need to be a little bit more on the offensive and spend a little bit more time selling.
Say more about that, because you actually just read my mind. That was literally going to be my last question. Would be, because we kind of talked about the candidate side this so far, right? Like, what they're happy with, what might motivate them to make a move, things that they can look out for if they're considering a move. But the hiring side is a little bit different. So elaborate on that point, just in closing, a little more on just like how hiring teams can kind of be aware of candidates being happy with their bonuses and maybe being compelled to explore the market, dealing with the volatility. Just say a little bit more around, what hiring teams should be looking for and how further they can separate themselves and sell themselves.
Sure. I think that it's first understanding where candidates are at right now. And to your point, I think given the volatility, there's candidates who are already in financial services that are like, I'm super busy. I have to pause what I've got going on. Maybe I was interested in looking now. It was more active earlier in the year. Now I need to be more passive. Just my time is so limited. Or, let's say they had really great returns one day and they're like, cool, I want to wait and see what this looks like. I want to see, what the future could look. And I want to be clear, I'm speaking specifically about candidates who already are in financial services. The ones who are interested in coming in, I still see that as a normal flux. But on the hiring side, on the client side, I think that, it's been interesting over COVID, because I think that clients went into a really bullish market where they, threw tons of money back in 22. And then in 23, 24, it was like, people should just join us because we're the better firm. And, I think in this market, candidates need a little bit more convincing. And it's not to say that firm A isn't better than firm B, but I think it really comes down to understanding each candidate's motivations and having a more specialized sell or a more specific sell to that candidate. And, I do encourage clients and recruiters alike to work together on that. So to really, always, but to make sure that we can make that experience for the candidate really, really unique.
Great points and perfect place to close. I think we say that all the time, right? We want to just be an extension of our clients' hiring teams, and we oftentimes have the perspective to be able to help them kind of augment and improve and optimize their hiring value proposition. So great place to end. Thank you so much. As I said, no one better in our business to be able to elaborate on the tech market. Thanks for your insights. Thanks for your contributions. And I will talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of Searching Smarter. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, keep searching smarter.